Welcome to HR Rewritten, a seat at the taboo table, where we don't play nice with broken systems and we say the things most people won't. I'm Victoria Forsberg, founder of 922 Solutions, focused on fixing what's broken on purpose. Before we get started this evening, a few rules of engagement for the table tonight. We speak from experience, not theory. We challenge ideas, not people. And we don't hide behind HR language to avoid hard truths. We're here to fix what's broken, not protect it. Because when you start talking about audits, accountability, and legal exposure, things tend to get uncomfortable. And that's exactly where real conversations start. I'm joined by my co host, Becky Newbury, who's been digging into tonight's topics and shaping how we're going to approach this conversation. And we're also joined tonight by Halisi Tambuzi, attorney and workplace investigator specializing in HR risk exposure and system audits, helping organizations understand where they are vulnerable and where they're ready to see it or not. Becky, I'm going to hand it off to you to set the table for us, please, because this topic has a lot of layers and I want to make sure that we frame it right before we jump in the deep end.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tori. Halisi, we are absolutely thrilled to have you on our program tonight. And a big thank you to Rod Samra, who has been a guest on our podcast multiple times, and he referred you. Speaks very highly of you. So we're very grateful to have been connected with you. We are going to be talking about HR audits. There is no company anywhere where their HR department shouldn't be doing these HR audits. So I wanted to ask you if you can share what is an HR audit.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. I've listened in on. I'm a fan, so I'm really excited to be here and just to have this conversation. And hopefully the listeners can kind of glean some information about their own processes. So thank you for the question. And you know, with the audit, I think what you're looking at is employers. You'll typically have an idea of an employee in the back of your mind. Who is this employee? How do you think of them? Whether they are competent, whether they are annoying, whether they get things done, whether they accomplish things, all of those adjectives that would describe an employee immediately knows their team. And so when you talk about a HR, I like to call it an HR health check. That we're in looking at your the personnel records that are there, and the idea is, does the personnel records line up with the idea of the employee that the manager has in their head? And oftentimes it does not. And so the question becomes, why does it not? Why does it not align? And those things start to highlight that there is coaching that may not be being provided, that there is documentation that is not there, that is typically provided to the employee to provide them with notice about certain things. And so the training starts. And so then when you start those pieces in there, you can clients in risk areas that can come back and bite an employer or an organization later on. And so in HR health check is looking at these pieces that are there, the coaching documents that are there, those final termination letters that may say you're not going to get your wages until you return our equipment. And so it really starts to highlight those areas.
Perfect. And you established and laid out a lot of the purpose and reasons why they're necessary. And thank you for hitting on documentation, because that's a massive issue with a lot of managers and leadership. So realistically, how many companies are actually doing these?
When I talk to people, sometimes I will reach out to businesses, get a sense of how they are handling their HR processes, and very rarely are they uh, going out and doing an audit on themselves. They may do an audit if they've had a lawsuit of some sort, or maybe like a Department of Labor audit that they've received notice of, to say, okay, we need to go ahead and look at our system. But that type of maximum trigger, such as a lawsuit, right? There are a lot smaller triggers that less risky, that, that are less costly, that can also tell you, provide like a health check on yourself. So some of those might be an unemployment claim, employment all the time, and those unemployment documents come in, and sometimes employers want to prevent unemployment benefits from being distributed, which is understandable. However, maybe that's when you can look at your documentation to say, look, we don't have the documentation in place prevent unemployment benefits from being provided, even if the in the right to say unemployment benefits should. That is a small area, low cost area, where you can start to really see what your employment records look like.
Halisi, if I may jump in here, I was in corporate HR for many, many years and went through several audits, and I have some issues because most of the audits are always internal, right? So they're only as good as how difficult you make it from your internal sources, right? And then perhaps there's a finding or something, but in the meantime, maybe there's an infraction that calls OSHA to the scene, and then we have OSHA getting into the files and into the records. And then also there's the ISO audits, right? If you're ISO certified. So, yes, I agree there should be internal audits. But now that I'm out of corporate America and trying to help businesses and organizations, I'm partnering with you and locking arms and saying, hey, you need a third party practitioner that knows what they're looking at to develop your auditing system for you, because it's not happening enough. And quite frankly, I guess what nuts and bolts, what I'm saying is, internal audits is a box checking exercise that makes the top down feel good. Yep, we completed that audit, but then what happens? Like, where's the strategic planning after that? How do we correct things that we find? Do we find anything? Right? So, what do you
Yeah,
go
and
into
that's what the
businesses? Yeah.
yeah, and that's precisely what an external audit, some third party to come in that is not dealing in the day to day task of helping the business run, and can provide a critical look on the way that the organization handles their HR systems. And and I think oftentimes it can be a way of being overly critical rather than being helpful to the organization and helping the organization develop and improve. And so I think it's incumbent on us as these external practitioners who are there to help businesses thrive, is to be able to help communicate to them that this is a benefit to their organization.
Absolutely. And we have an audience question that Victoria put up. And before we hopped on, or before we went live, I actually said to her, we should probably change the answers to, be honest, has your organization ever done a true HR audit? Change it to yes, no, and what's an HR audit? Because I know there are numerous people out there, HR professionals, even leaders, what have you, who are like, what the heck is that? I've never heard of that before. And to be honest, I know with myself, I have done compliance audits and things along those lines, and auditing employee files. It was really just kind of high level, like make sure I-9s are not filed with it and things along those lines. And really with documentation and things along those lines, we are so reliant on leaders to provide that to us so we can make sure we've got those in place, prior to them picking up a phone and saying, we need to write up this person or put them on a PIP or we need to terminate them, whatever the case may be. And I think when you do those HR audits, it's really going to provide HR professionals the opportunity to reach out to those leaders and say, what are you doing? You're really putting us at unnecessary risk. And you shouldn't have to wait until a lawsuit, hangs over your head before you become proactive and make sure all your ducks are in the row. And so having said that, what would you say would be like the process of it? What it actually looks like. I know we talked high level of what it could include, but really how would you describe the actual process for an effective HR audit?
Thank you. I think in an effective HR, it tends to start with looking over homing that for language, right? They're in the handbook. They have the big policies of sick time and PTO, but then there's these kind of smaller areas, like as for example, even cell phone policies, right? So a lot of times you don't want employees using the cell phone kind of during the workplace, which is fine. What you tend to find, and when you look at the PIPs or the corrective coaching documents, is that employers will start providing disciplinary action just for possessing the phone, which is different than a usage aspect. And the possession of the phone tends to be protected by the National Labor Relations Act. To just the presence of the phone, a little bit of protection. Now the use of the phone is different, and so you're looking at those personnel records, and often sometimes managers and supervisors don't know that kind of small distinguishment, and so the question is, do they want to know the small distinguishments that can really kind of pose a risk to the business? So kind of starting looking at the employee handbook can tell you a lot of information. And then when you move over to the kind of the coaching documents in the personnel records, you start to see a little bit of a clearer picture about, are things connected? And what I mean connected is, take for example a wage. Was there a notice in their personnel records of the wage increase, and did it provide a significant reason, a particular reason of why the wage increase took place? Or does it just say you've been increased $2 and that's the end of it? And so if you've only been increased if you've been increased $2 and there's no kind of rationale behind why that increase has taken place, well then the employee who's coming behind them can say, well, I'm entitled to the $2 increase as well. There's no distinguishment about why this other person received a $2 increase.
That's a great
And so
point.
now we're looking at we're looking at unpaid wage issues that have come into play now. at this point. And unpaid wage issues, you might really be talking about your regular wage, but it ties right into overtime. It ties right into travel pay, and whether or not those employees are getting accurate. So just those kind of small
Mhm.
documentation when there's not an actual trail to show how they're connected can start to pose a risk.
Excellent. And then Linda Clark had answered our audience question. And hi, Linda. We're excited to have you in the audience today. Thank you for joining us. She said not enough companies are doing the HR audits. She said audits are too often a reactive response to a close call or dumpster fire. Doesn't get any more real than that. um, so, what do you think it's saying about the people who are being audited?
Yeah, that is the tricky area. That's the tricky area because when you look who was the manager who oversaw this wage increase or this demotion, it starts to it can look bad on its face. And so I think as partly as my job is to say, did you did one is the manager expected to know certain compliance information? And we would say they are a team building kind of role that's there. And so a manager is not always going to know all of the compliance pieces. And so I think there's room to have a conversation about uh, educating and training managers and improving their skill set, and then ultimately
So sorry.
improving the business.
Gotcha. And with your, I'm sorry, I'm dropping all sorts of stuff over here. Um, it's real, people. We're live. So, Halisi, as an attorney, what are some of the really um, embarrassing things that you see when you are, trying to get all the discovery items together and everything else? What insights can you share with us?
Well, I mean, when you talk about discovery, so right now I'm doing more of like the pre-litigation pieces. I'm not so much focused on the aspect of the lawsuit, uh, and battling back and forth with the other attorneys. So I'm not going through the discovery phases and whatnot. I'm simply using my particular skill set as a early on preventative measure to employers avoid and prevent is a litigation that takes place. Feel a little bit more confident that uh, they've reviewed their records, they've adjusted the way in which they go through their processes, so that they can feel a little bit more confident about being in compliance. And in that's a lot easier of a process to give their documentation to that attorney who is going through the litigation aspect.
Right, because if they don't have that in the employee file, the employee requests a copy of their complete file, and that's all that's in there. I mean, if that's, the employer can always go back and say, "Oh, we didn't do this. We got to put stuff in there real quick." Then that's going to look suspicious, right? Because why wasn't this there when the employee requested it originally? Have you experienced some of those issues where it's like the employee wasn't provided it upon request, but then magically all this additional documentation was in place when the employers provided theirs?
Yeah, it's definitely there, like not there at the time of termination, right? So terminations at that moment, an employer's thinking, you know what, got that out the way. The employee's gone anew, right? Let's start anew. The anew doesn't necessarily mean they're going back and looking at their records. It's more so out of sight, out of mind. Let's focus on the people that we have here. But that out of sight, out of mind, that when that time passes, the statute of limitations is still is, and sometimes the statute of limitations can be, it can be 90, it can be 3 years, depending on. And so when it's out of sight, out of mind, you're not thinking about that time running and about what that may be doing, thinking about, stewing over. And there's a lot of information today when it comes to AI, access to information, and so people are more in tapped with identifying that I've been wrong. That kind of internal thing of like, I think I've been wronged. That is very common. And then they may take it to Chat GPT of some sort, and Chat GPT will affirm their their wrongness, affirm their emotions, and provide them not always with accurate information, but just enough to get that employee to need to go to an attorney.
Absolutely. Yeah, or, file a claim online with EEOC and get that going too. Um, Tori, I feel bad. I've been like hogging this conversation. Did you have any questions that you wanted to pop in there or anything you wanted to
My
share?
brain's going 100 miles an hour, right? Because there are so many things that cross it. Um, we could go down one whole rabbit hole about the AI stuff because some of my friends will call me and say, "Well, I asked Chat GPT this," and I'm like, "Well, here's what you have to know: Chat GPT is non-emotional. It's going to take the emotion out of it, but it's going to play off of your emotion. So it's going to answer whatever you ask it. If you say, 'Hey, do I have an EEOC claim here?' It's going to say, 'Yeah, you do.'" Because it want that's just the nature of ChatGPT. So yeah, that could be a whole nother conversation. I think, Halisi, I just want to understand, like, so you help the employees inside of the business, like you're trying to set the business up for success with their employment documentation before they make that termination happen, and then you also represent employees that believe they may have been wrongfully terminated. Do I have that right? Is that your
I'm,
practice essentially?
I'm not representing. I'm not representing any. It's really the task of helping the employer
Get on track.
improve their documentation to strengthen their business. Yeah, and by doing that, and by doing, they actually can create a better relationship with their employees. So when we sit down, and it's one thing that being in this space, one thing that I've learned is that by working with the employers, they actually end up kind of changing their conversation that they have with their employees, and by that, it ultimately ends up, it can strengthen the business. Employees are leaving; they're leaving on a better note than previously.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry to jump in here again because my brain's going a million miles an hour too, or a minute, whatever. But what would you suggest to be the frequency that they are doing these HR audits? Would you say annually? Biannually? Would you say semi-annually? Um, Quarterly? What's your what's your advice on that?
Yeah, mine would be to do something annually. I think if you are up to try to be, you just had a recent lawsuit of some sort, then doing something that is every 6 months might make sense for a while, but then kind of moving to doing a health check annually.
Excellent. And typically, oh, We have an audience question up there. Victoria, would you like to cover that?
Sure. Do you think most companies avoid audits because they're afraid of what they will find? Okay, folks in the chat, answer. Throw them in there. Throw your answers in there. We want to see them.
And go. What are your thoughts on that, Halisi? How would you answer that question?
Yeah, no, I think that companies avoid there's a little bit of fear. There is a little bit of fear that takes place, a little bit of fear with, am I the responsible party for for the client's risk? There's a little bit of fear. I think there's also a little bit of they may not know what to look for. They may not know the distinguishments between using a phone and possessing a phone. Um, when it comes to corrective coaching, right? Their documentation might say something along the lines of, "If this happens again, you'll be terminated." When there could be a situation that arises that the action may occur, but it may not be the best time to go ahead and terminate them on that instance. And to terminate them then might be a little risky. But as as the manager, as a supervisor, their previous pit, whether it was a final written warning, they're thinking about that and how to be consistent. And if I don't terminate this person right then and there, then how is my team going to see me? And so they're thinking about all kind of those pieces, and not necessarily about of this termination. And so you may not want to actually terminate them right there. And so in the corrective coaching documentation, rather than giving a threatening, this happens again, you're going to be terminated, a little bit more, we can terminate up to and including termination, having that language in there. So it gives a little bit
Mhm.
of wiggle room if there is a per category situation on the next go around.
Perfectly said. Um, and really, what has been your experience? Tongue tied here. What has been your experience about why these HR audits aren't taking place? Is it because HR is being told, no, you don't have time for that. We need you to focus on these other areas. Is it because HR just doesn't realize the severity of it? What would you say is the common reason why HR isn't conducting these HR audits?
I think they feel overly confident the way in which their processes run. And so there is little
Wow.
room for correction or for adjustments in their processes. Uh, so I, now the good thing, kind of, I would say with me, professionals, I've coached, I've trained, and so I have a bit of rapport with working with HR professionals, and so I understand, I can understand and communicate, like, this not it's not about you specifically. It's about trying to improve the processes within. And so now if they feel empowered to say, oh, that's how we can use the language moving forward, now they're actually going to better within the organization. They've increased their skill set.
Excellent.
That was mind blowing to hear you say that, by the way. When you said they're overconfident, it's like that. I don't know. I guess because I don't feel like I've ever been overconfident. Like every time I've heard the words, we're going to audit, whether it's internal, ISO, external, third party, whatever it is, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to start before the audit starts. But that's just me, right? So it's kind of mind blowing for me to hear you say that most companies are overconfident that they've just got everything, you know, high and tight, like it needs to be. That's shocking to me because I'm also, while I'm saying this, I'm also thinking, the manager that comes in and says, well, I want to give so and so a $2 raise. And then a day later, they come in and say, okay, I want to give, Jane Doe $1.50. I gave John Doe $2, and just the sheer documentation of what that looks like. And then HR becoming a dumping ground because these managers aren't trained properly. Like I can see a whole conundrum and ball of wax. Like, oh my gosh, not only do we need better at audits, but we need better training for our managers and super. I mean, I've said that for years, right? You throw the guy that has or the gal that has the most tenure at the company that has zero absences in 1 year. Oh, they're a great employee. Let's make them a manager. And then they can't have a conversation with anybody or can't hold anybody accountable. So then you end up doing all their paperwork for them because, hey, they're a great employee and we just promoted them. So we want them to be successful. So you've got to take them under your wing. Like I can see this all just, my mind is exploding right now because I hear Halisi say, my job is to be proactive and help these companies get on track. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these poor HR people, they're just going to get dumped on with everything. And it's like, I hope you have a special soft spot in your heart for HR people.
And really, Halisi, that leads to my question: like, how do you get through? How do you break through that ego barrier?
Yeah. So with that, I think breaking through that, I think there is it's there. So I want to back up a little bit. I used to customize employee handbooks. So after law school, I went into to policy writing, customizing employee handbooks, and and
Yeah.
and so I was doing like about two a week. So you can imagine doing that for 8 years. So you can imagine how many handbooks you get under your belt.
Yeah.
Um, in addition to that, I was providing documentation to employers, whether that would be termination letters, coaching documents. And one thing I found was they actually weren't delivering the things that I would provide and give the guidance.
Yes. Say it louder for all the people with ears.
They actually
Holy
were not delivering the documents that I would provide them with the language, speak to my other colleagues about, and make sure it's good, comfortable language. And then go back a couple months later and say Halidi didn't give the
I'm getting ready to
documentation,
drop this.
and
I'm getting ready to drop this. It's a mic drop moment. I'm sorry, go ahead.
and so what helped me with that is that I was like, oh, people need a little bit more hand holding. And so they sometimes they need someone to go in to say it's not here. And I'm telling you it's not here before a lawsuit. It's not here now. So how do in some ways reignite a conversation without it exploding so that you can say, "Oh, let me go ahead and give you this documentation." So now it's there. So now we have a complete picture. And so rehashing the conversation to go back over the facts, you're having a conversation so that you can get your personnel records in order.
I just have to throw this in there really quickly. I had last year I had 3 companies contact me wanting a handbook. We want to update our handbook. Our handbook hasn't been updated. 3 different companies. The subsequent question that I asked, I was like, okay, great. Yeah, we can do that. Is it my favorite work? No, it isn't. Could I write one in my sleep? I feel like I could. But the question that I then asked them is, okay, let's talk about this. How many employees do you have, and how are we rolling this out? Because not only do you have to create a handbook, and I don't care if nothing changed in it. I mean, if you haven't looked at it in 10 years, there's going to be changes. So, how are we rolling that out? How do we make it accessible? Do you want printing? Do you want a kiosk established where they can access it themselves? And they're like, we just want a handbook. And I said, well, it doesn't do you any good if you're not going to communicate what's in that handbook. You have to set the standard for people. And I'm just like, where is that? Like, they think that's going to provide them some automatic protection. And I said, you can't create the handbook and go about business and not tell anybody about it. And then John Doe does something wrong and you go to him and say, okay, on page 46 of the handbook, nope, violation, you're out the door. And John Doe goes, I never even saw a handbook. So then they're like, oh yeah, we probably should tell them about that. Just like, whatever.
And really, if I can just jump in there with this, I mean, what are your thoughts, Halisi, with HRISs like Workday? I've worked with Workday, and you're able to automate write-ups, and you can put conditions in there that if you want to do a write-up, you're going to, before you can get to that point, you have to upload documentation, before you can proceed to that next part, that next step, and you're able to, have all your onboarding documents generated through there. Even have your handbook items, acknowledgments. You can sign them electronically and have those stored in there. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it should be, should there be also a physical copy, or, does the electronic stuff work just as well?
I think the electronic stuff works, right, as long as you can easily access it. So I don't have a problem with the electronic stuff. I do have a problem with the ATS systems. But as far as like storing it, and I'm not super concerned about whether it's in a software form or whether it's hard copy. If you can transfer it to hard copy fairly quickly by parade. I think what's concerning is the language that's being used inside of the documentation. So that can be a little bit concerning to me, and that is a little bit of the particular manager that they're working with, the kind of how much training have they had on being an HR individual. How much training have they had on compliance? And so that would be where my biggest concern would be. And I think it's understandable that some language is used improperly. I mean, we're talking about humans trying to correct and hold other people accountable, and so we make mistakes. And so all we're trying to do is spot them before they become a legal issue and before it becomes very costly. I think it's important for employers and organizations to understand that when you ask for help, there are rules to asking for help. So when you hire employees, there are rules to handling the employees. And so doing a health check can help you spot those areas that you may not be privy to. Organization is good at selling the product or service. That's what they're good at. They're not always good with the employee side and how those interactions work.
Gotcha. Would you say that, I mean, actually, let me back up. I'm very curious. Have you ever had a company push back on you when you've said you need this, you're missing this, you're doing this wrong? Have you ever encountered anything like that? And how did you handle it?
Yeah, I get a pushback often, and I think pushback is a way of identifying that they're not completely comfortable, and so you have to find a way to get them comfortable. And so examples are a good thing. I don't like to use kind of just egregious examples like, oh, you could be sued, right? That is true, but a more common example is probably just an unemployment claim that happens more regularly. And would you feel confident your documentation to try to stop benefits? And if the answer is no, then we need to go ahead and just look at the communication that you're using to your employees. Look at the documentation that's in there. Are they even being notified about the rules and the policies within the workplace?
Mhm.
I would like to
So
take the HRIS system just one step further. So, Halisi, when you go into an organization, is that kind of your starting point? Do you start like by doing an overview of the HRIS system? Because let's face it, I mean, it's 2026, and most companies probably do have some type of HRIS or ATS system that they're using to, run through process applications and then into payroll, timekeeping, all that. So, and they've been implemented perhaps by people, their predecessors. So we had this conversation on one of the very first roundtables we did when Rod, and I see Rod in the chat. So hey Rod, good to have you here. Um, but we were asking Rod from a compliance standpoint, like where are we going with all of this, and what do HRIS systems bring? Because it's only as good as it was when it was implemented, right? If you dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's and you had a good system, somebody still has to be behind the scenes updating that, just like a handbook, right? You've got to update policies, you've got to update verbiage when things change, when laws change, when new laws come into effect. And so, I guess in a roundabout way, is that where you start? Is that a starting point for you in an organization? I mean, or where do you start?
yeah, so I start with the handbook, but I also like to know how are they keeping up with compliance. And when you ask that question, it's almost like they they're not, and until something occurs, and they're like, oh, I gotta pay attention to sick time now, but not like they don't know prior to the sick law being changed. It is it is
Yeah.
afterwards when an employee comes and says, you should be giving me sick time, then that's when they look at it. So when you ask the question, how are you keeping up with compliance? Oftentimes I don't get a response like, oh, we're not really. And so I'm like, okay. And that was one reason why I put out a checklist, so that people can kind of go through it, and it's a yes no, but it at least allows an area to simply say, or we're not looking at it at all. It doesn't measure the compliance aspect of it. It's a question of, are you even paying attention to it?
Oh, yeah. That's a great point. That's a great point.
What would you suggest to these companies to, how they would set up these annual compliance or HR audits? Um, is it something that you would recommend if you have an HRIS to utilize that? Even of course, scheduling in your Outlook calendar annually, recurring spreadsheets to track when the audits are completed, and ensure that each of the pertinent sections are included. What would you suggest?
Yeah, so I would suggest, like I said, I think for them to do it annually. But as far as to track it, I think putting it on marketing on the calendar to say, hey, we're going to start our annual health check audit process, and it can be good to get get the attorney involved if they have an attorney, as far as making sure that particular information, if something does take place, meaning that if there is a risky area, then at least you can still get the attorney-client privilege that is present. under a law firm type of practice. So that can be helpful. So when the attorney's involved, then you can make sure that you have that protection still. And so I, I think from there, then you're looking at you get employee records, and you're kind of lining those. That might be on an HRS system, so that it might be hard copy. And so there are ways to kind of make sure that you're getting each employee's personnel folder to go through that. And then you have your own, then you ultimately have your own kind of measurement document to make sure that you're tracking the information, or kind of like a scorecard, so that you're able to identify the various risks that are there, and report back to the employer about, hey, this is what your score looks like. We all like scores. We all like percentages, 1 through where am I at? So that can be helpful.
The magic metrics, yes. And I think that's phenomenal, because you can actually identify through those scores where training is lacking, where you need to emphasize, a lot of the focus, and you really be able to identify where to eliminate the risk at. So I think that's all amazing. And I know we're kind of wrapping up on our time. Do we have any other audience questions that we want to ask Tori, or any responses we want to maybe mention?
Let me see here. Oh yeah, we'll post this question for the audience. We don't have a lot of audience participation, but you guys don't be shy to answer in the chat, because P.S. we're not going to tell your company, but we might look into your company and see if we can help them at all. We want the best, right? I mean, I just think this is such great information, and it just, even though I'm not in corporate America, and I'm trying to do the same thing kind of along the lines, I mean, not at your caliber, but doing the same thing with my business, just helping organizations. And in some ways, I find it easier to approach the businesses. As I told somebody, if you hire me, I can come in, or if we have a conversation, I can come in and look at your business top to bottom and make a suggestion. And I can, make a suggestion and put together a plan and say, I can help you do it, or you can do it yourself, and then I can walk away, right? I don't have to be stuck in it. So that's kind of the way I like to roll. And I want to help businesses be better, because I've seen it. I've been in the throes of it, and fighting for my life and fighting for my breath while trying to get everything documented and up to speed. And especially when you take over from somebody else, right? When you inherit an HR department. And I've never been the one to say, oh, well, they did this wrong and they did that wrong. Like, people do the best they can. And it's like, you got to just get in there and pull your bootstraps up and get after it. But I think that's why I created this table, so we can talk about things like this. And everybody in the chat, or everybody that rewatches this tomorrow, hopefully they'll say, yeah, I'm raising my hand in silence over here, because we got some issues and we need to start looking at them, right? So, yeah.
Oh, I don't know if we lost him. It might have shut down.
Oh, no.
Are you there, Halisi? It's a beautiful sky. There you are. We just had this. Anyway, how would you recommend, how can you empower HR professionals out there who are struggling with being given that latitude to make sure that they are getting all these compliance things done, especially when CEOs or C-suite leadership are wanting them to look at something else? I mean, what sage advice do you have to give on that?
I think when it comes to HR, recognizing that they're already doing a lot, that they are a major function of business, and so when they are doing the the day-to-day things, and they're so ingrained into the business. When I think by recognizing the work that they put in is part of the benefit, and then saying, hey, having an external person come in. Oh,
It's okay. No,
my
this is
child is
real
walking.
life. Don't even
Yeah,
apologize.
do not
Don't
apologize.
It's
even
real life,
apologize.
yeah.
You're good.
So
Let's see. I was
so
looking in the
having an
chat.
external
Go ahead.
having an external person
Oh,
come
go ahead,
in
Halisi.
to oh, okay, having an external person come in to do the external looking takes a little bit of pressure off of the HR person who's doing the day-to-day stuff, so they can still focus on their day-to-day work. I think I'll get to an audit because you're so, I got this, I have XYZ to do. How am I going to do this audit and take time out to go ahead and do that? And so having an external person come in to take that pressure off, and then sit down with that HR person afterwards. Now you map out a plan to say, this is what we found, and this is now their strategy for the rest of the year. And now they have work to actually work that has been laid out to strategize to actually move forward. And so they're not chasing anything. They're just looking at the report and saying, now I can go ahead and implement this.
I used to call it drinking from a fire hose. That was my day to day life, drinking from a fire. It's like, and then someone said audit, and I was like, audit? What? Huh? I can't put this fire hose down long enough to even think about getting files together.
Right. That's exactly what it is. So giving them that grace, I think giving the HR person that grace, I think is a starting point to how you make them comfortable. You show that it's not an attack on their work. They are moving forward to try to improve the processes.
Love it. Love it.
Meeting
And
them where they're at, right? We talk about meeting people where they are. And I think it just goes a long way. And you don't, I mean, maybe you don't understand. I loved and appreciated when someone would meet me where I was, understand that I'm drinking from a fire hose and be there to help me and support me instead of saying, you're not doing this and you're not doing this and this is not right and that's not right. So it's actually meeting people where they are. And I think that goes a long way about building that rapport and being able to get those egos down to understanding the importance of the benefit of what you're offering, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Victoria, were you going to read? Was there a comment you were going to read?
Gregory, who was one of our OG podcasters, Gregory Liverpool, he's in Canada. He said, on this side of the table, it is job descriptions. Example, I have seen 3 EDIA or DEIA positions that's calling for 5 years in the sector, since the sector has been only less than 5 years old in corporate Canada. So that's his, you know, we got to look at those. I sympathize with Gregory because I used to have that battle all the time about job descriptions. Well, I want someone with no less than 10 years of experience. I said, well, what if you had somebody that was really dynamic that only had 9 years of experience? And they were like, well, yeah, if they're really dynamic, we want to talk to them. Well, I said, they're not going to apply because your job description, the post that you posted, eliminates them right off the bat when they read it. So they're not going to apply. So do you think that might be a little biased? I mean, how about let's put
Yeah.
some skills in there? If you mastered it in the first 2 years you did it, good for you. If it took the rest of us 12 years to get it, sorry about your luck. You're a slow learner, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just amazing, but you have to make that point. So I feel Gregory's pain when he's trying to apply for work and he gets eliminated because the company's not even 5 years old, but yet they want somebody with 5 years.
Make it make sense
and
for
there,
sure.
and there's something to be said about how the internal HR communicates this to their leadership about getting external audit. And so in Gregory, the 10-year, I think it's a great point. And so we're kind of reaching out to other HR professionals or other experts to say, how can I communicate that this job description is, needs to be revamped a little bit. And so even if you're kind of focusing on that job description, when you start to say, hey, maybe it doesn't highlight all the skills that are necessary. You don't necessarily need the 10. Hey, just by looking at that individual job description, what if there are more areas that pose a risk to us? And to take some relief off of our HR team to have someone else come in to help us spot these issues.
And that gives the perfect opportunity to also make sure that your employees or their jobs are classified correctly as far as hourly or salary. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues with that too. And it's different by state and it's also different, federally. So there's always a lot of work to be done with that as well.
Now, we have 2 minutes, you guys. The time just flew by. Halisi, would you take our invitation to join us again? And I can see a powerhouse where Becky and I would never get a word in edgewise if we had you and Rod Samra on the same podcast.
I'll take that as a yes.
I was waiting for
it. I would love to join you guys again. I think this has been
yeah. Becky and I will be going.
I was going to say I'll be quieter next time, but I have a big mouth. So,
Halisi, I just have to say, we might go a couple of minutes over here, but I have to say, we've been thinking about the idea of trying a 2-hour podcast because we just get into it and then it's like, boom, the hour's over. And it's, so we've sat in the background going, you think anybody would want to talk to us for 2 hours?
If we get the the HRCIs, the learning credits in there, that'll help too, right?
We'll do a 4-hour podcast.
Yes.
Well, so before we wrap up, I want to ask you. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I enjoy this, and even just with you two, the energy that you guys provide, it does set the stage. There's so many additional questions that come into play just when having the conversation, and so I really appreciate this conversation, and it did go by fast.
Yes,
it did go by so fast. So, I will pose the final question to you, Halisi, first, and then we'll do a little call to action, and then I'll wrap us up. I know we're a little bit over time, but we got started a minute or two late, so we'll be good. So, Halisi, what's one thing you wish more organizations understood about auditing their HR systems?
Ask that one more time. What's one
thing you wish more organizations understood about auditing their HR systems?
That it's not about catching bad behavior. It's not about discipline. It's about improving and moving the business forward and doing the strategic planning.
I
And
love
staying out of hot water.
that. Okay, Becky, you're next up. So, what's one thing leaders should be thinking about or contemplate doing differently after this conversation?
Be less defensive, drop the ego, and realize that if you don't jump on board, you're putting the company at unnecessary risk. Learn how to document and stay on top of documentation. And just real quick, I mean, that's the end of my answer, but one thing I just want to throw in there is um, I my crown is just here because I wanted to wear it. So, and my pearls is in case I needed to clutch them. Anyways, but I just have to say, Halisi, I have just loved this discussion with you, and there are so many more things that we can dive into, and I'm really looking forward to doing another podcast, especially with Rod included too. So, the end. Your turn, Tori.
Halisi, tell people where they can find you, how they can contact you, what you want DMs. What do you want?
Go to my LinkedIn, Halisi Tambuzi. So go to my LinkedIn is perfectly fine. You can cite www.wpihr.com.
Great, Becky.
Oh, find me on the LinkedIn. Rebecca Newbury, Newbry. There's no U, no E, no any other extra letters, just Newbry. Okay, 6 letters.
I think it's Rebecca M.
Oh,
Rebecca
yeah, it's under
M.
Rebecca M, but I don't, it should be easy to see me.
Well, you can find me across all social platforms, 922solutions.com. That's built in partnership with 75 Digital Management. And I just have to give a shout out to Jamie, who's supporting us behind the scenes tonight. She's been a huge part of bringing 922 to life for me. And I'm eternally grateful for her. So please visit 75 Digital Management for your marketing and website needs. I think what stands out to me about this conversation is how often organizations are trying to fix outcomes without ever examining the system that's producing them. And audits aren't about pointing fingers, as Halisi just said. They're about creating clarity, because when you understand how your organization is actually operating, you can finally start fixing what's broken in a meaningful way. The reality is, most organizations don't fail because of people. They struggle because the systems those people are working inside were never designed to support them in the first place. If tonight's conversation made you think differently about your organization, good. That's exactly the point we wanted to make. That's the work. And these are the conversations we're going to keep having. So thank you for being here with us tonight. This is HR Rewritten, a seat at the Taboo